So how do you use a little piece of plastic to turn a picture like this into something with better color in your subject without changing the color of the background? I'm going to show you on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey there everybody, welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions. Don't forget to go to AskDavidBergman.com, ask your own photo questions. I just might pick it to answer right here on a future show. Also, if you're not already a subscriber to the Adorama YouTube channel, why the heck not? What are you waiting for? Go ahead and click that button down below. You can also click the little bell so you get notifications. You'll be the first to know as soon as new photo shows are released all week long from myself and the other photo hosts right here on Adorama TV. Today's question is a good one sent in from Gary J, and he wants to know, in the old days of film, we would take indoor social club flash pictures and would correct the pictures by using colored gels. The idea was to deliver a perfect exposure with the flash and use the gels to correct for the color of the background. It seems like so long ago that I can't remember if the gel was on the flash, the lens, or both. Thanks in advance, Gary. Gary, I appreciate you sending that in, and I'm going to get to the specific solution for film in just a little bit, but if you're one of my regular viewers, you know what I'm going to do first. To understand how to use gels in photography, we first need to back up and make sure that we understand how white balance works. Now, all visible light sources have a color temperature that's measured in degrees, and I say visible light because I just did a video about infrared light, and that's not light that we can see, but visible light is measured in degrees, not Celsius or Fahrenheit, but in degrees Kelvin. Different Kelvin temperatures actually produce different colors of light. So for example, if you're outdoors in the middle of the day and the sun is shining with no clouds, or what we consider to be daylight, that's around 5600 Kelvin. That's generally considered to be neutral with no perceived color cast. Now here in the studio, I use the CLAR Illumi Max 500 high-power LED light to light me up when I do my videos. It's a daylight balanced light. So if I were to measure the color temperature of the light hitting me from that light, it would be right around 5600. This white piece of paper, for example, looks white exactly as you would expect. However, if I turn off the LED and use the overhead light in this room instead of the LED, you can see now that everything is much warmer, including this white piece of paper is a much more orange color, right? Everything has warmed up quite a bit. That's because the little bulb in my ceiling is actually a tungsten light, and the color temperature of tungsten lighting is usually around 3200 Kelvin, much different than daylight. Now, the Canon EOS R that I shoot my videos on has various white balance settings that I can actually use to color correct for that shift. I'm currently shooting on the daylight setting, because I'm usually using, of course, that CLAR daylight balanced light, and so that's why I want to be on daylight. But if I were to change the EOS R to tungsten, you can see that I've shifted the warm color of the tungsten light closer back to neutral, where this white paper is now white again. Now it does this by moving in the opposite direction on the color wheel. If you remember your color wheel, you go the opposite direction. So in this case, moving more blue is going to neutralize the warm colors. Now, even though the color is correct, this overhead light is not ideal for shooting video, so we're going to go back to my LED and the daylight white balance. Okay, so that is obviously much better looking now. The thing is, in the real world, our brain is really good at interpreting the data collected from our eyes, and it compensates for those color shifts. So you might not even see those color shifts from tungsten or fluorescent lights in real life. The technology built into our brain is quite amazing, but the camera isn't quite that good and interprets things a bit more literally. Now you can go ahead and use auto white balance, and that's going to do a pretty good job at guessing what color your image should be. But particularly when shooting video, it's really better to lock in your color balance on manual because you don't want the colors to shift during a shot or even from shot to shot. That would be a nightmare to correct after the fact. Now for still photography, I shoot auto white balance most of the time, but I'm also shooting RAW, and I hope you are too. That allows me to carefully set my white balance in the computer after the fact, since that setting can be changed without any loss in quality. Now, what circumstances would I choose not to use auto white balance for still photography? Well, this gets into Gary's question about using gels. Here's the thing. If your scene is being lit by only one type of light and the color is pretty consistent across the entire frame, it's relatively easy to correct the color in your RAW file on the computer, just like I did here with the video. Flash is daylight balance. The light coming out of either a speed light like this or a big studio strobe without any modification is going to be in that daylight 5600 Kelvin range. So if everything in your photo is being lit only by flash, then it's absolutely no problem. The challenge is when you have mixed lighting. So Gary asked about the very, very common scenario of using flash to light your subject, but the background is actually being lit by different lights. The ambient light in the room is different than your flash. If you're indoors, that ambient light is probably not going to be daylight unless you're lucky enough to be in a room with a lot of big open windows, and then consider yourself lucky. But in most cases, the overhead lights are going to be fluorescence or tungsten, like this little silly one here in my studio. So how do you set your white balance in that situation? Well, to demonstrate, what I did was I set up a tripod in the hallway outside my office here. The overhead lights out there are tungsten lights. With my camera set on daylight, you can see how warm that photo is. It doesn't look that way to my eyes in real life, but that's the actual color of the lights because they're tungsten. Now, if I change my white balance in the camera to tungsten, that's going to compensate for the warmth by shifting everything more cold or blue, giving me a more neutral photo, just like I did with the video. Now, two quick sidebars here, just as an aside. First of all, the camera presets are rarely going to be exact because even the same type of lights can vary wildly in color. How and where they're made, how old they are, and a bunch of other factors can slightly change the actual color temperature of any given bulb. So the best method, if you instead of using those presets like tungsten and fluorescent, is to use the manual custom white balance setting on your camera, which allows you to shoot a picture of something neutral like a gray card, and then you use the camera to have it compensate for that color shift. And again, you can use manual and actually set the Kelvin temperature to a specific number, or you can do that custom white balance and shoot that gray card and let the camera make the decision. But I'm going to go ahead and stick with the presets just for now to keep this discussion simple. A second sidebar is that sometimes people get confused when setting the Kelvin manually on their camera because it seems backwards from what you might expect if you know about color temperature of particular lights. Tungsten lights are warm, as we've already discussed, and their Kelvin temperature is down in the 2500 to 3000 range. But if you set your camera to 2500 Kelvin, manually set it there, the image isn't going to be warm at all. Quite the opposite. It's going to be blue. Now, why is that? The reason is because setting the Kelvin temperature of 2500 of your camera, what you're doing is you're not telling the camera to make everything look warm like it's being lit by tungsten lights. You're telling the camera that what you're shooting is already being lit by warm 2500 degree Kelvin tungsten lights, and that you want the camera to compensate by shifting everything more blue, giving it a more neutral image. So it seems backwards where you're down in the 2500 range and your picture is going to be more blue even though 2500 Kelvin lights are warm. All right, makes sense? Good. Okay, so back to our hallway. Now, it looks fine after making that switch to tungsten white balance, but now let's say I want to photograph a person in this hallway. What I did was pull out the old mannequin head that I bought for a few videos back and set it up in the hallway on another tripod. Now I threw in the X-Rite color checker passport on there just so we could see the colors a bit better, and I can balance them even more accurately later if I want to. Now, just like in the video of me, the overhead lights are the right color since I'm on the tungsten white balance now in my camera, but it's really just not a flattering photo on a person with those overhead lights. So I'm going to go ahead and add in some flash while still having my background lit by the ambient light in the hallway. I'm not going to use flashes to light up the whole hallway. I just want to use that ambient in the background, but a flash on my subject. So I had the flash zoomed in all the way so that the light would only hit the mannequin and not the walls around it. Because my camera is still on tungsten, you can see that that shifts everything colder, which is absolutely perfect for the background. That's how I want it to look. But my subject, she's looking a little blue, unfortunately. So that's because the light from the flash is daylight, as we've discussed, not tungsten like those hallway lights. So it's shifted the same amount colder, making the daylight flash to blue. Now, how do we fix this? We can actually fix this by making the flash color and the ambient background color all of the same so that I can shift it equally back to neutral in the camera using the white balance setting. I'm going to say that again because it's really the most important point in the whole video. That's what this is all about. If the goal is to get correct neutral light across the entire frame, what you want to do is try and make all of your lights, anything in the scene, produce roughly the same color temperature, no matter what that color temperature is. If they're all the same, then you can correct for everything together by shifting the white balance in your camera. If your picture only has overhead lights from the hallway, for example, they're already the same color, so that makes it easy. But if you want to add flash, which is daylight, you're either going to need to make the hallway lights into daylight, which isn't going to happen unless you want to go ahead and change out all of the tungsten light bulbs with daylight ones, which you're not going to do. I'm not going to do that. Or easier, you can change the color of the flash to put out warm tungsten light. You can do that simply by adding a gel on the flash. Gels are little pieces of colored plastic, and by putting them over the flash, it changes the color of the light coming out of it. Now you can buy gels in just about any color, shape, or size you might need. I like these little ones because they fit pretty much perfectly right over the flash. You can buy bigger ones and cut them down if you want, of course. Now in this situation, I'm going to use a CTO gel, which stands for color, temperature, orange. You can get CTOs in quarter, half, or full power, and you can even combine them depending on how much correction you're going to need. To match the hallway lights here, I guess that a full CTO is probably best. And all I did was I used a rubber band to go ahead and put it on here, right? To just rubber band it on. I've used rubber bands and tape. There are much more elegant ways to do it from companies, products from companies like MagMod, where they have a magnet system to attach modifiers like gels, grids, and even softboxes. If you use gels a lot, then I definitely recommend you go that route, and I'm going to put links down below to that stuff. But now, once I have that CTO on my flash, when I take that same photo in the hallway, the color coming out of the flash is much more orange because it's shooting through that gel, and it's just like the background. It's orange like the background. So if I shoot my camera on the daylight white balance, it's going to look like this, which of course is way too warm. But as I said before, since it's all even now, I can now switch my camera to tungsten and everything shifts blue, making both my flashlit mannequin and the ambient light background into a neutral color like my eyes can see it. Comparing that to the same shot without the gel in the flash, you can see that I've shifted the light on my subject without changing the color of my background, which actually has been the whole goal of this video, and I finally got there. So, Gary, when you were talking about the social pictures back in the day, the only difference with film is that you really can't change the white balance in the camera like we can today with our modern digital cameras. Now, if you were using slide film, you'd either have to use special tungsten film, which they make, and that's balanced to be more blue for tungsten light, or you would have had to use a tungsten filter over your lens, which is like a blue filter over your lens to shift that daylight film more blue, and then adding a CTO on your flash so your light is all even. Needless to say, it's much easier today with digital cameras where we can make those shifts from frame to frame whenever we want. So that's how you use gels on your flash for color correction. You can also use gels to get creative. I've done plenty of band portraits where I put fun colors in the background to add some depth and color, or just to make it look cool, right? So you can absolutely experiment with gels in creative ways as well. How are you guys using gels? Are you using them? How are you using them? Let me know in the comments below. Also, go ahead and like this video, of course, if you like the video. I hope you did. Remember, go to AskDavidBergman.com, ask your own photo questions on there. I'm also offering one-on-one photo consultations. You can check that out at AskDavidBergman.com as well. I am back here every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern on Adorama TV with a new episode. I hope you'll send in your own questions. If not, either way, come join me every week right here on Adorama TV. I'll see you next time on Ask David Bergman. Thanks so much.